Do you know what the most painful thing about betrayal is? It's not that someone lies to you. It's not that they leave you. The most painful thing is that you once believed they would never do it. If a stranger betrays you, you'll be disappointed for a few days and then move on. But when the betrayer is someone you trusted the most, everything changes. Suddenly, you start doubting yourself. You wonder what signs you missed. You blame yourself for being too naive. And worse, you start losing faith in everyone who comes after. The irony is that the betrayer only hurts you once, while you inadvertently relive that pain hundreds of times in your mind. There's a question worth considering. Why do some people seem to be betrayed again and again? They change friends, and they're still betrayed. They change lovers, and the story repeats itself. They change jobs, and the outcome is almost the same. Do they always encounter bad people? Sometimes it's true, but often the problem isn't who they meet. The problem lies in what they carry with them in every relationship. The funny thing is, many people believe that the more they trust others, the more they prove their sincerity. They've just met someone, and they've already told them all their secrets. They've just fallen in love, and they've already placed their entire future in their hands. They've just made a friend, and they're ready to sacrifice everything. They call it living wholeheartedly. But sometimes, it's just handing over the keys to your house to a stranger and hoping they won't take anything away. Stoic people don't live by suspicion, but they also don't give away trust too quickly. They understand that trust is like an ancient tree. It needs time to grow. You can't plant a seed this morning and expect shade by afternoon. It's the same with people. Words might move you for an hour, but only time will tell you their true character. One of the biggest mistakes after being betrayed is trying to find a perfect explanation. You reread every message, you recall every conversation. You try to pinpoint the exact moment things started to change. It feels like a detective investigating a case where the culprit is long gone. You believe that finding the answer will lessen the pain, but the reality is often the opposite. The deeper you dig into the past, the more trapped you become. There's something quite interesting about psychology. People hate unfinished stories. That's why we always want to know why. Why did they change? Why did they betray us? Why did they treat us that way? But life isn't always generous enough to give you a clear answer. Sometimes, the only answer you get is their actions. And honestly, that's enough. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us that the best way to deal with betrayal is not to resent the other person, but to prevent their actions from turning you into a bitter person. This is something many people miss. After being betrayed, they don't just lose faith in one person. They lose faith in everyone. They build a high wall around their hearts and call it maturity. But excessive defense isn't always wise. Sometimes it's just an unhealed wound wearing a cloak of strength. That's why the first lesson isn't to stop trusting others. The first lesson is to learn to observe more slowly. Don't let promises blind you to action. Don't let today's emotions dictate your trust years from now. Trustworthy people don't prove themselves by what they say on a good day. They prove themselves by what they repeat when no one is watching. And the moment you start judging people by consistency instead of beautiful promises, you'll realize that many betrayals have actually been sending signals for a long time. It's just that by then, you were too busy believing in your hopes to calmly see what was really happening. This is also the time you need to understand a truth that many people take years to accept. The person who betrays you isn't always the one who hates you the most. Sometimes, they just love themselves more than anything they ever promised you. It sounds harsh, but many betrayals don't begin with hatred. They begin with selfishness. When their interests conflict with their loyalty to you, they choose their own interests. And then they find every reason to make that decision seem justifiable. That's why many people can sleep soundly after betraying you. Not because they don't know they did wrong, but because they've told themselves a convincing enough story to no longer feel guilty. People are very good at justifying their actions. They say they had no other choice. They say circumstances forced them. They say you're also partly to blame for things happening this way. And if you keep trying to find remorse from them, you'll probably be disappointed for a long time. This is the mistake many people make after being betrayed. They can't move on because they're still waiting for an apology. They believe that if the other person admits their mistake, their heart will be healed. But think about it. If your peace depends on someone else changing, aren't you giving them too much power? Stoic people don't wait for others to give them back their peace. They take it back themselves. They understand that forgiveness doesn't always mean going back. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing ever happened. Sometimes, forgiveness is simply deciding not to let a past action continue to control your future. There's something quite funny about this. After being betrayed, many people say, "I'll never trust anyone again." But years later, they meet someone completely different and begin to doubt that person's every action simply because of what an ex did. It's like being hit by a reckless driver and then deciding never to get into another car again. The person who hurt you is gone, but they continue to control your life through the fear they left behind. That's why the lesson isn't about closing your heart. The lesson is about building a better door. A door that can open to the right people, but also close to those who don't deserve it. Many people confuse trust with a lack of boundaries. Trust doesn't mean ignoring warning signs. Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting betrayal over and over again. And love doesn't mean staying in a place that has repeatedly hurt you. Interestingly, those who mature after being betrayed don't usually become colder. They just become more observant. They are no longer swayed by overly sweet promises. They observe how a person keeps small promises before believing in larger ones. They don't look at what others say when things are going well. They look at how that person behaves under pressure, when there's immediate gain, or when there's no longer a need to impress. Because true character always emerges in such moments. And then one day, you'll realize the strangest thing. The person who betrayed you is no longer the most painful lesson in your life. They become the person who unintentionally taught you how to judge people more clearly, set better boundaries, and love yourself more. Not because they deserve thanks, but because you refuse to let the pain be the final chapter of the story. Finally, if you are repeatedly betrayed, don't just ask why others do it to you. Let's ask another, more important question. Am I too quick to give my trust, too afraid of losing others, or too easily overlooking the early signs my heart has seen? Because a strong person isn't someone who has never been betrayed. A strong person is someone who, after each hurt, learns to maintain their kindness, but no longer blindly gives their trust. And perhaps the most thought-provoking question is, what do you truly need after a betrayal? Is an apology from the person who hurt you, or the courage to stop waiting for it and start rebuilding your own life?